Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third session of my bibliotherapy class on women, reading women in the Bible during the time of Corona. This is Dr. Elana Sztokman. I'm doing a Rereading Women of the Bible series to help us read our own lives as we all go through the traumas that the entire world are going through right now, without forgetting that we also have gender issues to talk about, and we also have often unique experiences as women, even in Corona. Tonight, I did a session on Rivka and Rebecca, and I forgot to record it. So I'm going to redo it. I'm redoing it now, but without the beautiful commentary and discussions with the women who participated tonight, especially Rivka and Linda had really important comments. So hopefully I'll remember what they said when I re-record this. Well, not re-record it, record it for the first time. Okay, so Rivka is a really interesting character because we have the quintessential story in her life was where she manipulated the blessings of her sons so that Jacob received the blessing that was intended by their father Isaac, her husband, for Esau. And that caused an enormous amount of pain that we'll look at. And I wanted to ask ourselves why she did that and what does it say about her life as a woman. And also about the times that she lived in and the context and the social context that she lived in, and what can we learn about it for our own lives today? Where are her experiences reflected in our own experiences? So we'll start with where the text introduces Rivka. She's introduced when she was a maiden. We don't really know how old she was. The Midrashim say that she was 3 years old, but we really have no idea. She was old enough to be drawing water from a well and old enough to take a lot of initiative and speak. She doesn't sound in the text like she was 3 years old, but she was certainly a virgin, and the text says she was a virgin and a maiden and ready to get married. So, right. So let's take a look at, I'm going to do some screen sharing here. I'm going to share the text. I'm looking at I use the English, the Chabad site. The Chabad site has English and Hebrew next to each other in a form that's very easy to read and in sort of very readable English, even though sometimes their English translation is stretched, and we can ask ourselves why the Chabad translators preferred a particular reading to another. Here in this section, actually, there's an instance of that we can look at. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to share the screen here, which comes from, we're looking at, and I'll also share the link, and I'll put the link in the chat so that, let's just put this here. So just hang on a second. Start a chat. Where's my chat? Hang on a second. I'm having trouble sharing the chats, possibly because it's not a group right now. It's only me, so there's nobody for me to chat with. Is that why it's not letting me chat? Oh, here we go. No, it's letting me chat. Okay, paste and go. Okay, so you can see in the chat, you can also see the site that I'm using, but also you should be able to see the shared screen. Okay, so we're starting with the chapter in which we're introduced to Rivka, which is Genesis chapter 25. And it's where Abraham sends his servant to look for a wife for his son. So he goes traveling to a place where they could find the woman with the right lineage, which in the text, it's clear that they want a woman with the right lineage, even though our Midrashim talk about a woman with the right character. So, and here also, there's some emphasis on character here too. So we'll start with, we'll scroll down the text takes place around a well. There are a lot of romances, courtships that take place around water and around wells. It's, you know, the nightclubs of the Bible. Okay. So we see, like in verse in verse 14, they're looking for the girl who has chesed, the girl who has that character, the chesed, the loving kindness. Okay, where he's getting instructions to say that the maiden to whom I say, the one who not only thinks about watering you, giving you a drink, but also watering your camels, providing water for the camels, that's the one who has chesed, who has that character. So yeah, my house is packed right now with kids and family and extensions. This might be our last time. So they're all in the other room watching Monty Python. So if you hear some noise and laughter here or there, that's what they're laughing at. They're having a Monty Python movie night, and I'm having a bibliotherapy night here. When I finish this, I will go join them for Monty Python. I know how it is. Anyway, right. So chapter 25, verse 14, where they give the instructions to look for the girl with chesed, not just with the lineage. They're going to the place with the correct lineage, but they're looking for the girl with the particular character that they consider chesed, loving kindness, the one who thinks about the camels also. Okay, now, here comes Rivka. So, verse 15, they're still talking. Before they even finish talking, and Rivka Yotzeit, she like ran out, even while they're still, she didn't even wait for anybody to finish their sentence. And here they first introduce her with her lineage. Yudah Betuel, Ben Rivka, Nachor, Avraham. Okay, so she has the correct lineage, she's family. But then they say, V'hanara, verse 16, V'hanara, Tovat Mareh Ma'od, Tula V'ish Lo Yeda'a. Okay, so the second most important thing is that she's available, she's a virgin, and before they even say that, they say that she's beautiful. A lot of biblical women are described as being beautiful. It's, you know, we have Sarah as being described as beautiful, Esther was described as being beautiful, Abigail was described as being beautiful. We have, even though Abigail also she was described as being smart. So being beautiful is part of the patriarchal culture that all this exists in, that this is how women are, these are the characteristics: to be a virgin, to be beautiful, and to be serving water, doing what women are supposed to do, which is serving the water, or, you know, serving the men, serving the camels, and caretaking. Women as the caretakers, the carers of the men, the carers of the household, like that. With that, however, okay, with that construct of women as the nurturer, the beautiful, caring nurturers, there's a really interesting description here of Rivka, in that she's rushing out, and she's rushing, and she comes out before they even finish talking, and then it says the Eved runs to her and asks for some water, and she says, "Here, she's hurrying also. You know, she's rushing with the Eved. She feeds them, and as soon as she finishes feeding, giving them water, okay, I'm also going to feed your camels, which is, of course, the characteristic that they were looking for, the person who thinks of everyone. She thinks of those in need. She thinks about the needs also of people and also of animals. Okay, that was the path that they were looking for. And then they go through a whole ritual here, and then she gets jewelry. Now, it's really interesting here to see Rivka's character. Yes, she's living in this completely patriarchal culture where she is valued for her beauty and being servile, but within that, she is a girl or a young woman, a maiden, we don't know how old she is, but she's a young woman who has a lot of initiative. She does what she wants to do. In other words, she's taking action. She's not passive. She's not sitting around. She's not a Victorian woman sitting on a chair. Okay, she's working. She's actually working. And I feel like this is a really important point, because I think that in Western culture, the way patriarchy has constructed femininity, has sort of conflated being servile and being passive. That Victorian construct. It's also a 50s sort of construct of like the woman of leisure, she doesn't work. The idea of the woman who doesn't work. And here, with this, what we're seeing with Kaz, we're not seeing a woman who doesn't work. Yes, we're seeing a woman who is owned in marriage, who is taken in marriage, whose job is to serve men. But she does it with a lot of agency. She has a lot of agency, and she also has voice, right? She speaks here. There are a lot of women in the Tanakh who don't speak, who don't have a name. She has a name, she has lineage, she speaks, and she does, and she's not asking permission. In other words, when she says like, oh, I'm going to feed your camels too, she's not asking permission. She's using her own mind. She's thinking for herself. These are, to me, really interesting characteristics. And for me, it feels important to separate different aspects of how we construct femininity and patriarchy, because it's important for us to say that being a nurturer, being the one in charge of nurturing, does not necessarily mean being dumb or dim-witted or passive. It doesn't mean shutting off your brain. You can be in a position of managing food, managing water, managing household, and still be smart and still have agency. It actually feels really important to me personally right now in this age of Corona, because as women, like, we're sent back home. Like, I am here in my house very much in charge of a lot of caring and nurturing now. We've got a lot of people in our house that are all here all the time, pretty much, and I have to be really careful with how we allocate food and how we allocate resources. There are a lot of scary things out there, and I'm doing it. I am very much managing the kitchen and managing the household and managing, lots of people with different schedules. This one's studying that, making sure that everybody eats and that everybody's cared to. But I'm not doing it in a way that it is a little bit hard for me, right? Because it feels like being in that role carries a risk of sending me backwards, of saying, oh, I'm becoming the woman in the kitchen kind of thing, who like is in charge of everybody's food and like that. And so it carries that triggering risk for me. But I also feeling like, no, I'm doing this in a way that is not about me becoming passive and servile. I'm not servile. I'm managing. I'm actually leading. It's a leadership position for me right now in that sense. Even though I have lots of mixed feelings about leadership, but that's a whole other conversation. So I'm looking at Rivka, and I'm seeing this story here, in that Rivka was a person who was, yes, in charge of a lot of household chores, but she was a girl who thought for herself, a woman who thought for herself. She had her own ideas. This is super important when we get to her that quintessential story about what she did with the blessings and the manipulations that she did there. So we have some context to her, so we understand her character a little bit. She's a woman with character. She's not a woman without character. Also, two other things that I want to point out in this chapter. One is that they asked her if she wanted to go to marry Yitzchak, and that's hang on a second. I want to just see if I can just find that that verse. I'm not going to read the whole chapter here. There's a lot here, and it's a really very rich chapter. They asked her. Hang on a second. Yeah, they're telling the whole story. Hang on. Here we go. Verse 57. Now it's all these men in those 20 verses that I just scrolled down. The men are all having a conversation about Rivka. They're talking about her, and they're talking about how much she had initiative and how much she had loving kindness and she had all that chesed. But then they do this remarkable thing, and they say, they say, let's ask her what she wants. This is agency. This is agency. This is another scene that we really don't see very often in the Bible. And actually in the times of the Mishnah, there's a whole discussion about whether or not it's important for a woman to have a say. And the halacha actually evolved between the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara. You see there's a whole discussion in the Talmud of Kiddushin about this, about whether or not a woman has a say, to say yes or no. But here we have Rivka, Rivka who's asked and who has a say in who she wants to marry. So that is really important. That tells you that patriarchal culture is not one thing. There are gradations. There are variations, and there are patriarchal cultures in which women have a say and women don't have a say. Okay, and here we see Rivka had a say. She was asked and she answered, and her answer was definitive. Yes, I will do it. Okay, so that's one really interesting point here also. The last little bit that I wanted to point out from this chapter is also at the very end of the chapter, where in verse 67 it says, "Vayavia Yitzchak Oala Sarah imo." He brought Rivka to Sarah's tent, which there's a ton written about that. But also we can also ask. It's also connections between women and women's cultures, and there's something very powerful about that, about connections between women. Vayikach et Rivka vaytihi lo li'isha vayehaveha. Okay. And so here we have a phrase, Vayahaveha, he loved her, which we didn't see with Abraham and Sarah. And in the previous session, we saw that the relationship between Abraham and Sarah was fraught. It was fraught. It was not, there was a lot of bitterness, and the word love was not used. Not only that, but we also have the story, which is significant in the story also, is that we have the story where Abraham went down to Egypt and told Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister. And it seems like in that story that Pharaoh actually slept with Sarah, and that he was worried about a plague. And Pharaoh was more worried about that terrible thing than Abraham was. Abraham wasn't worried. He basically pimped her out. Pimped her out because he got a lot of money. He got a lot of mikneh love. He came out of Egypt a very, very wealthy man. So there was that. Here is just one generation later, same ancient biblical culture, but with a very important nuance of difference, which is that here we have Yitzchak loved Rivka. Not only that, but Yitzchak and Rivka were monogamous. Rivka was Yitzchak's only wife. And so that tells us something very interesting also, that monogamy also existed, that marital love existed. So again, patriarchal culture isn't one thing. It could be a lot of different things. And even within patriarchal culture, there could be monogamy, there could be marital love, there could be a form of respect, and a woman could have a certain amount of agency. Agency can exist even within a patriarchal framework, or some agency. Okay, let's look at the next story with Yitzchak and Rivka. So here's the story of Avimelech, which is the story in which Yitzchak makes the same mistake that Abraham did, and he goes into a foreign kingdom and says, Rivka is not this woman is my sister. He does what Abraham did. It was a very big mistake. Abraham did it twice, and it was a big mistake. And here's Yitzchak is doing it also. But here, Yitzchak did it, and then what happened? Hang on a second. Wait, I passed it. One second. Yeah. Here we go, verse 7. So Vayeshev Yitzchak Begar. Now, first of all, Vayeshev Yitzchak Begar, he went to live there. Vayeshalu Anshe HaMakom L'Ishto Vayomar Achoti. In other words, the people of the place asked him about his wife, and then he said, she's my sister. It wasn't his initial intent. It wasn't like when Abraham did it with Sarah, He did it with purpose. So he said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to pass you off as my sister, so that power will do well for me. So they won't kill you. Once he says so, that they won't kill me, and then once he says so that he'll do well, so that I can make some money and do well there. So here he says it. He says, he was afraid that they would kill him. Because she was so beautiful. Okay, so he says that. And then the next verse is, so they were there for a while, and Avimelech is looking in the window, and he sees Yitzchak mitzachek. It's a really incredible play on words here, because the whole idea of Yitzchak is all of this funniness, all of this laughter, all about like things not being exactly the way they're supposed to be, ironic, strange, funny. But what does it mean, Yitzchak mitzachek et Rivka ishto? They were playing, laughing, and obviously in some kind of sexual way, because Avimelech concluded from that they were husband and wife. So obviously they were laughing and playing in a husband and wife way. Okay, so they were having some sexual activity. So that is also interesting. Okay, it's interesting that they had a sexual relationship, and also that the sexual relationship is described with language of laughter and playfulness, like sexuality, actual sexuality. So that is really fascinating also. We're seeing, and also that even though Yitzchak had sort of said, oh yeah, she's my sister, he still continued to live with her. It wasn't like what Abraham did, where he gave Sarah to Paro and she was there with Paro. Here, he didn't give Rivka to the king of Gerar. He still stayed with her. So that tells you that it wasn't quite the same as what Abraham did. And also, the next verse, he says, what did you do? Why are you telling me that she's your sister when she's a wife? Why did you tell me that she's your sister? Okay? And he says, in the next verse, he says, we almost caused this terrible thing where somebody was going to sleep with your wife. So that tells us that it didn't happen, right? That nobody slept with Rivka. As opposed to with Sarah, where it's not quite as clear. It's not quite as clear. It really does sound like in the Avraham story that somebody did sleep with her. Anyway, the point is that here we're seeing a very uncharacteristic, or what we would perceive as uncharacteristic in an ancient patriarchal culture. We're seeing a man and woman who have intimacy, who have a relationship, who laugh together, who are monogamous, who speak in language of love, where the woman has voice, where the woman has agency, where the woman is not punished for having her own opinions, but is welcomed for that. She is loved for that. She is a woman who has her own opinions and is loved for that. That's how this story is being set up. And it's quite beautiful and in a way sort of inspiring until we get to the end, until we get to the last story of Rivka. And that's where things go sour. Okay, so here's the story. We're going to read most of the chapter. It's chapter 28. It's the story of the stolen blessings. One of the stories of stolen blessings. There are two stories of stolen blessing, one that happens over a bowl of lentils, and then there's this one that happens at the end of life, at the end of Isaac's life. Okay, so Yitzchak was old and he was blind, and he calls Esav b'no hagadol. He calls his eldest son Esav and says, come. He says, I'm dying. I'm going to die soon. He says, he says, go take your tools, go hunting, and make me something that you know I love. Which is also interesting because that whole exchange also implies love and intimacy, father-son intimacy. It's very different, say, from the kind of relationship that I imagine Abraham and Yitzchak had as father and son, where Abraham was ready to sacrifice his son. He was ready to put him on the altar. And even when God said to him, he says, take your son, your only son, the one you loved, Yitzchak. Remember? It was like it wasn't enough for God to say, take your beloved son, because that could also make Ishmael, which is the one who was beloved. So it's really not clear. And we can only imagine what kind of traumas Yitzchak kept, had held on to from that experience. But this here with Yitzchak and Esav is a very different relationship. It's a relationship of feeding, of love, of caretaking. Esav was happy to feed his father. Yitzchak understood that Esav knew what foods he loved. You don't know what food somebody loves unless he spends a lot of time with them and share things with them. So that's a very different relationship. So we see Yitzchak as a man who has love in his life. He loved his wife and he loved his son. However, he loved one son. We don't see that he loved Yaakov. And this here is the problem in Genesis. The tragedy of Genesis is right here, is favoritism. Throughout Genesis, we have one story after another of one child being the chosen one, the favored one, whether, Cain and Hevel, or whether it was Esav and Yitzchak and Ishmael, or Esav and Yaakov, or later on Yosef and his brothers. All of these stories, these tragic stories that ended up with generations and generations of tragedy, all started from the same mistake of parents playing favorites and saying, this is the special one. Now, the writers of Genesis, whatever the intention is of this biblical story, the intention is to make that out to be a good thing, in the sense that, well, it's all about transmitting the blessing. It's all about who's going to be the chosen one, who's going to be the one who fulfills God's mission in the world, and that becoming the Jewish people, becoming Israel conquering Canaan, Israel conquering Ishmael, conquering Esav. We are conquering all of these nations throughout our history because that is our destiny from the time of creation. That is the message of Genesis. The message of Bereshit is to say one child is the carrier of the chosenness. But those stories carry so much pain, trauma, and tragedy, one after another. The story we're about to read is one of the most striking ones of how this favoritism leads to bad things. So here we have Yitzchak calling Esav his son, his mates, okay? And then a minute later, we see Rivka in Pasuk Hey, verse 5. Rivka shomat b'daber Yitzchak el Esav b'no. Rivka hears Yitzchak talking to his son and doing, he's going to go make a meal for him. And then Rivka amra al Yaakov b'na. And then she says to Yaakov, her son. Esav is his son, Yaakov is her son. Okay, so in the session that I did earlier tonight, we had a bit of a discussion about this and whether or not this is natural parenting, whether or not it's normal and natural, and this is just the way things are for parents to connect to one child or another. And what I'm suggesting is that whether or not it's natural, it's bad. Okay, it's a practice that leads to pain. And then we also had a discussion about ways that in classrooms also there's a lot of unconscious bias, and especially there's a lot of gendered unconscious bias that teachers will say nicer things to boys than they do to girls. We'll say to boys like, you're so industrious and you're so strong and you're so smart, and they'll say to girls like, oh, you're so orderly and you're so helpful, and things like that. Anyway, in my second book that I wrote with Chaya Gorsitman called Educating in the Divine Image. We have a whole chapter about this, about unconscious bias and the way teachers talk to students in different ways. So my point is that being unconscious, it causes a lot of pain, and that I would prefer parents be more conscious, use these stories to recognize how important it is for us to love all of our children, to love all of our children, and to not create a bechor, a special one, a chosen one. Okay. Now, what does this mean though, like that Esav was Yitzchak's son and Yaakov was Rivka's son? Were they both chosen a certain way? What kind of family dynamic is that when you have two children? One is loved by one parent, one is loved by the other. What kind of family is that? I mean, so we had in our previous chapter love, right? There was love between Rivka and Yitzchak. But now we have this split down the middle. That's tough. Okay, that is a big dysfunction. Okay, that is a really big dysfunction. Despite all the love, we have this dysfunction. Okay, and what does that dysfunction lead to? It leads to Rivka doing this terrible thing. Okay, so she goes, Rivka amra al Yaakov ben Alemo, hine shamati davecha medaber al Esav. Okay, she brings Yaakov and she says, hey Yaakov, listen, I just heard your father talk to Esav. He just sent Esav out to get his favorite foods in order to get the blessing. And now she said, Matabini shma b'koli, listen to me carefully. Here we have Rivka, the agent. She's got agency. She's got initiative. She's smart. She's cunning. Okay, she's the boss. She is the boss here. Okay, she's saying, listen to me carefully. Ani mitzaveh otcha. How many women do we have in the Bible who speak in this language? Ani mitzaveh otcha. How many women? Who do we have that gives orders? Who gives orders? Okay, we have Dvorah maybe. Okay, this language, Ani mitzaveh otcha. This is with God taking charge. Okay, and what does she do? She gives him all the way down to the detail. She's also very micromanaging here. She tells him how many animals to get. She says exactly what to get. She says what to say, and she has the whole thing with putting hair on his hands. She thinks of everything. Okay. And again, she says Shema b'koli in the verse 13. Your Gimel, she says again Shema b'koli. You do this. Okay. So he went and he did it, and he came to his mother, and he did exactly what she said. And then she took Esav's clothes, and then she put them on him. Okay. Now, Yaakov comes to his father, and he says, and Yitzchak, who's expecting Esav, says, wait, who's here? Who are you? Mi ata b'ni. Which, of course, also tells you how split this family was. That he was so busy expecting Esav that he didn't even recognize Yaakov. But maybe he did a little bit, right? He knew something was wrong. Because when Yaakov says, Vayomer Yaakov el aviv anochi Esav b'chorecha, asiti kasher dibarta elai. Okay? Yitzchak was confused. Right? Vayomer Yitzchak el beno mazeh mihavta limtzo b'ni. That was too fast. Something doesn't make sense. And then he says, Gishana ve'amushcha b'ni. Let me touch you. Ha'atah b'nei Esav im lo. Are you really Esav, my son? So Yitzchak is not sure. He's not deceived. He may be blind, but he's really not easily deceived here. It takes a couple of steps and a couple of stages. And then he says, okay, so he didn't recognize him, and then he has the famous, Kol Yaakov Radai Esav. I swapped psukim there, that's pasuk kafbet. Okay, and again, in other words, Yaakov goes through a lot of steps here to maintain this deception. This was not a simple deception. This is a lot of lying. It's a lot of lying down to details of lying and deception. And it's lying and deception for the sake of stealing something very precious. Key. Because why? Because what is so precious about this blessing? It is this eternal blessing. It is the establishment of a status for eternity. It's hard for us. We also talked about this earlier on in the session about the power of words. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around the idea that like the blessing is permanent. Like that if Yitzchak was to give the wrong blessing, how can it be that it's permanent? But this is the biblical way. It starts from Bereshit, that God created the world with a word. God said, let there be light, and there was light. So a father gives a son a blessing, and that's how it is. So this was the belief system, for whatever it's worth, that a word is a word. Not only is a word, but a word creates. A word creates reality. So that's what we're seeing here. So Yaakov is here to steal that powerful word, to steal that blessing, to steal the stamp of eternity, of superiority. Okay, so Yaakov gives him the blessing, which is in verse 29, which is the essence of it. Ya'avducha amim v'yishtachavu lecha le'umim hevei gvir le'achecha v'yishtachavu lecha b'nei imecha. Okay, what is this blessing? It is a blessing that other nations will bow down to you. Your brother will bow down to you. It is establishing an eternal hierarchy. One brother will be king, and the other will be the one who's destined to bow down to that king. Okay, that is what he's stealing here. He's stealing a status, a kingly status for eternity. Okay, so he did it. Yaakov did it. He got what he came for. And when he finished, he left. And then Esav Achiv ba mitzedo, verse 30. Esav came back. And he also, Vayas gam hu matamim, he also did it. He made what his father loved. And he made it out of love. Yaakov made it out of strategic planning and cunning, but Esav did it out of love. And now this is when, and he says, Esav says, bless me. And Yitzchak says, what are you talking about? Mi ata, who are you? Vayomer ani b'ncha b'chocha Esav, it's me, Esav. And that's when Yitzchak realized what just happened. And how does he react? Vayecharad Yitzchak charada dola ad me'od. He was shaking, he was in terror. He felt this great terror, realizing that he had done exactly the opposite. He had created a backwards hierarchy of what he had intended. Kishma Esav et divrei aviv, and when Esav heard this, vayetzak tza'aka gdola umara ad me'od. He cried. Esav cried. This is tragic beyond description. It says, Vayomer ba achicha b'mima vayekach berchatecha. Your brother came in stealth and took your blessing. Okay. So this happened. This is one of the many tragedies of Genesis that come from hierarchy, the need for hierarchy, the need to assert one child is chosen and the other is not, which is bad parenting in my opinion. Okay? But where was Rivka in all this? Okay, so we have this whole story that took place. Rivka is not in the room here, and yet she's everywhere because Rivka did it. Rivka did this. Rivka did this. Rivka, who was fully capable of manipulating because she was smart and she knew how to speak and she knew how to take control. But why did she do this? So there are like lots of midrashim that talk about, oh, she knew, she saw something, she understood something that Yitzchak didn't understand. That Yaakov really was the one who was supposed to get it and Yitzchak was just too blinded, he didn't understand that she was going to make a big, big mistake. Let's say that's true. Let's say it's true. The big question that I have, and this is a question that is relevant to me today as a woman in 2020. If Rivka had this view that Yaakov should have been the one to get the blessing, why didn't she go to Yitzchak and say that? Why didn't she go to Yitzchak and say, hey, beloved husband, who I love, we love each other, right? We need to talk about this. Before you go and choose Esau, we need to talk about this because I have a view. I have an opinion about this. I think it should be different. Why didn't she do that? So this is sort of familiar to me. I've seen a lot of women, a lot of smart, savvy women not speak directly. I've seen a lot of women, a lot of feminist women and feminist organizations doing feminist things. Go behind the back. Go in secret, speak in secret, avoid confrontation. Alachat kama v'kama, even more, a woman living in a patriarchal system may also avoid confrontation. Why? So one is because you're still constructed as powerless. That Rivka, even though she was a smart, savvy woman, she was still powerless. She was still the one who was constructed, not as the one who gives the blessing. She's not the one who gives the blessing. The lineage doesn't actually go through her. Her views don't actually count. Even though she had that personality, her views still didn't count. And that is also relevant today because even as women are powerful in some ways, we are still living under a lot of patriarchal assumptions. So when you're still living in the patriarchy, when you're still coming from a place of powerlessness, you're still in the patriarchy, you still struggle. You still have struggles. So Rivka's story is a story of a woman who has a certain amount of agency, who has monogamy, who has love, but she's still living in the patriarchy. She still does not have the say. She does not have a say. So when women are still struggling for power, we might find other ways to create forms of power for ourselves, using all kinds of secret manipulations and things like this. And I've seen this too many times to count, even in feminist settings. And it's a reflection of the fact that we're still struggling with patriarchy and the impact of patriarchy on ourselves, with our powerlessness, and with our fears of confrontation, our fears of being assertive, our fears of speaking directly. And I would like to suggest that this is a really important lesson for us as women. This is an important lesson. Rivka has to be a really important lesson for us. Not to do what she did, but to make an effort to speak directly, to speak our minds, to take ownership, and also to recognize the secondary impacts of patriarchy on us, on our own behaviors, on our own relationships. Take ownership. Don't fall into these patterns. A lot of what we're fighting when we fight patriarchy is we're fighting internalized sexism. We're fighting a lot of messages about what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. Are we allowed to be assertive? Are we allowed to take charge? Are we allowed to demand power? Are we allowed to demand power? It's hard. It can be hard. But let's not choose the easy path, the sort of secret, behind the scenes, quiet, okay, we'll get things done. No, because that causes pain. That causes pain. Passive aggressive, manipulative causes pain, generations of pain. We need to own our power, to own it. Even if we're still living in sexist, patriarchal structures. Speak directly, own it. That to me is one of the really important lessons here. I think there are a couple of other lessons here also, but I think that this issue of women choosing manipulation as a form of of getting things done because we're still struggling with our own limitations. I think that's a very real lesson for us today. Anyway, I'd really love to hear what you think about it. I'd love to hear comments. Please share comments in the thread below. Please subscribe to my channel on YouTube. There'll be more of these. You can see my previous sessions on Eve and on Sarah and Hagar. Please share your thoughts. Yes. And good luck with Corona and all that goes with it. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching.